All right, Guy McPherson here on the Nature Backslash channel, having a conversation again with Peter Miller, psychologist from Canada. And we're going to cover, hopefully, we're going to cover a little range today, all the way from our own personal experiences seeking counseling or therapy, and all the way through how does this affect our lives, and have we brought this information to other people? How does it affect their lives? So before we do that, Peter, if you could get us started with your free course, tell us what the BPD stands for and tell us where we can find your course.
For sure, thanks. BPD stands for borderline personality disorder. And the name, I should say, sounds much uglier than what it is. It's really people who have been genetically predisposed to certain emotional sensitivities, certain types of vulnerabilities that they never had the opportunity to learn how to manage in their childhood development. So they didn't have a special kind of instruction, much like if you were, if you were born in Hawaii and you needed to learn how to ride big ocean waves on a surfboard, but you didn't have a good instructor. It's kind of like that. And people with BPD, they need to learn how to ride the big waves because they are genetically predisposed to larger emotions. So they need some good instruction. And very often they do not have that. Rather, they have the exact opposite. So they are led into their early adulthood, not really knowing how to live in their body in certain kinds of ways, which can lead to disastrous consequences in relationships and other health consequences, both mental and physical. So I've learned about this as a part of my own life experience. In particular, starting at about age 37, I dove deeply into the topic, and I was already finished a master's degree in psychology, but nonetheless, I was still struggling, like many others do, like high functioning people do, with mental health. It doesn't really matter, if you're a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant, you can still have this kind of thing. And you can be what's classified as a quiet BPD because you don't openly show a lot of the symptoms. That's another aside to the issue. But so I've developed this course about between the 10-year period of about 37 and 47. It's now freely available at freebpdcourse.com. And I am also now adding to it a little bit because I started a podcast at Smarter Than BPD. You can see that on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Amazon and others. So I'm adding that as to each lesson. There's a little, a link to each podcast that is relevant to each lesson. In addition to that, there's all kinds of resources from other professionals, links to at least 119 videos from other professionals who talk about the issue. So it's not just me doing the educating. I'm happy to offer this course to anyone who is seeking to get stronger. And that is something you need to be mentally healthy, is both knowledge and strength. And if you want that, or if you want to learn how to help others in your life achieve that, then check it out, freebpdcourse.com. Thank you.
Thank you. And we talked and sent email messages back and forth this morning indicating that there's a few questions that we're going to ask and even try to answer. And I'm just going to take those in the order that they were presented via email. First, have you sought counseling? As I have, and I've sought counseling many times, and generally only for half a dozen visits or fewer than that. And I'm not sure in most cases why I stopped going. And the excuse I always gave was, I can only take a therapist so far, and after that, I can't help them improve anymore. But obviously, that was just a joke to try to hide my own insecurities about why
Maybe,
I was going and why I stopped going to
maybe.
therapists.
I think it's a wonderful thing to do if you can connect with the therapist that you can relate with on, someone where you can feel safe and understood, and that you have kind of, I guess you could call it a bit of a therapeutic vibe. It's also been called therapeutic alliance, where you can feel that it's a good connection and the conversation flows nicely. and that you can both face difficult parts of yourself and freely express things without um, uh, feeling like you're being hurt in the along the way. I've done it on various occasions. I'm even currently doing it because of certain life stresses. Um, and I like to be exposed to that kind of, I guess you could call it like a therapeutic environment. If you can find it with the right therapist, it is really helpful because it can be hard to experience that in everyday life. Like, I don't think most people that you know, even family members or people that love you, like they still don't have the right skills, right?
Of course. I mean, it takes an education. It takes practice to do essentially anything. And so,
Mhm.
just because your sister took a course in sociology or psychology, that doesn't mean she's the best person to provide therapy for you.
Right. Or
And
even, yeah, even if they're like a biological relative, it doesn't mean they automatically are good at listening and good
right,
at reflecting and good at validating and keeping a conversation going that is constructive, which is sometimes what people expect. I think sadly they expect, like if the person is my loved one, or they're my relative, then it's like they should be able to do this kind of thing. But that's in many cases not the case.
right, of course.
And then they can be filled with resentment for that. Uh, and so, I think that's what a lot of us mental health advocates, we're trying to like raise awareness, like how to like apply some of these things. And in the podcast I did just yesterday, I was talking about how we have to adjust our expectations because most people, it'd be like me suddenly being able to acquire all the knowledge and skills and abilities of Guy McPherson. Like I can't just do it in a week. Like I'd have to follow the similar path that he went through, and all those years of study and all those peer-reviewed papers and all of those educational seminars that he's done, like so much experience. Like it's not like you can just get that kind of ability like in a week or 2 weeks. Like,
Right.
so you really have to adjust your expectations about,
You
from
you
your
can't even you can't even buy it on Amazon.
no, no. Like to become highly skilled in a certain area, it takes a long time, a lot of trial and error, a lot of mistakes, right? And I guess anyone who's been through any post-secondary education for any time and all the work that comes thereafter and field work, you know that you can't just become seasoned in a certain thing without a tremendous amount of effort and trial and error, right?
When I was on campus, we had a program called CAPS, Counseling and Psychological Services, and it was primarily for students. I'd have a student sitting in my office, and we'd be talking for a while, and become clear that they needed help that I could not provide. So the first few times I did this, I just asked them to go there, go to the counseling and psychological services place, and they always said, "Yeah, sure, I'll go there right away." And then they never did.
Hmm.
So I learned to pick up the phone, call counseling and psychological services, and ask if they had spot for somebody to come over within the next 10 or 20 minutes. And they always did. So then I would walk over with the student and I would tell them that I had been in counseling myself. And this is not, I mean, there's this stigma associated with the activity of seeking counseling or therapy, right? And
Can be, yeah. Hmm.
And so I would walk them over and I'd sit there until their name was called and they would go to the back room because otherwise they would escape every time.
Right. I'm not going to be associated with this kind of
Right.
activity.
Right. Because it's been so stigmatized by the whole society.
And which is interesting. I mean, why would it be stigmatized to go speak openly with someone who's, trained to be there with you and to go into the depths with you? Why would that be stigmatized? It kind of makes me wonder, like, why would people be afraid to talk about the subject of irreversible climate change? I think that's been stigmatized, right? So just for the plain fact that I'm here talking with you today, people could look at me and go, "Oh, he's just another tinfoil hat crazy person," right? Because he cares about issues of the environment. He's made general observations about how things are changing in the Arctic and how there's all these extreme weather events and like so and it creates an emotional reaction within me. I want to talk about it with somebody,
Right.
right? And I'm thankful that I have this opportunity to talk with someone at your level with it. And so, but I'm sure people are like, oh, I can't admit that I'm concerned about that.
Right. Absolutely. There's a stigma that extends from the environment to our own environment, to all of society, our own environment, including seeking counseling or therapy. And so if you're one of those people, then you might also be one of those people who wants to talk about the environment and what's going on with the environment and how it's no longer supporting a whole bunch of species on this planet. And we might be one of those, all the evidence indicates that we are going to be one of those species that is not going to persist through this mass extinction event. So,
Mhm.
but we can't talk about that.
And sometimes I think more sensitive people want to talk about that because more sensitive people are like, I'm picking up on something that isn't quite right, not just with my own health, but with the health of the world. Like there's like, I can feel it, right? And I think there's people who they don't feel it in the same way, so they don't have the urge to want to understand it in the same way as more sensitive types. And people, if they have anything even close to borderline, they're more sensitive. And they want to know what their senses are communicating to them. And sometimes their senses do confuse them, but sometimes they're picking up things that are bang on. Uh,
Right. But they're told by government officials, by corporate media outlets, by paid climate scientists that we got this. It's all under control. You need not worry about a thing.
right.
Climate has changed before. It'll change again. We'll be fine.
Right. Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything except the full-on blunt honesty, which is what I really appreciated when I first accessed your book, Going Dark. I mean, I was just like, this is full-on blunt honesty. And I can really appreciate these wordings and the frankness about stuff. I mean, when you see a whole town burned down, like a whole town burns down in a day. What was that? There was that one in British Columbia. What was that place called? It was like just a year or two ago. It just burned down in a day when the temperatures reached about 40 plus
Right.
C.
Right. And then there was Paradise in California.
Yeah.
Brings to mind the Eagles song called Play Someplace Paradise, Kiss It Goodbye. And and then there's Fort McMurray,
Right, right.
right? That just last year, a tremendous number of houses were lost and businesses
It was
fire.
years, a couple of years maybe, but like, yeah, like it was like half the town, I think, or at least the perimeter of the town, a portion of the town, like
Right, right, right.
burned to cinders.
It was not last summer because I'm reading the book about it now.
Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. But anyway, these events are happening, and it's not just in places in British Columbia or Alberta or California. Like it's
It's
here and there, like it's
yes,
happening.
it's Greece of all places. It's this Mediterranean climate in Greece where this is happening as well. It's suddenly it's just every summer there's just places popping up all over the globe that are burning that have
Mhm.
never experienced this kind of fire before in terms of intensity and rate of spread. These are much more challenging fires to suppress than we've ever
Mhm.
seen before.
Mhm. And it's strange how I think how people can these events can happen and they can be so shocking, and then we can just go right back into the mainstream narrative, like almost as though it's just when they say it's just weather, an extreme weather event like a whole town being leveled is just weather kind of thing. Like, how do you come back to that kind of thinking after a whole town has been leveled in a day? That is,
It-
how do people do that?
because that's the easy thing to do. It is. It's, I mean, that kind of thing has never happened before, so we don't know how to deal with it emotionally. So
Mhm.
we just push it off to the side. That can't be real. This can't be happening. It can't be as bad as they say, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
I mean, that's all I hear every time a town burns down.
Be that bad. And why is it, another question, why is it so easy to discount uh, the messages that long-term scientists bring to the table? People that are like, they do rigorous work, like yourself and others, and the work that you pull from the peer-reviewed literature. Why is it so easy to discount that information as being just weather or somehow irrelevant or trivial?
Most people don't have the background. They don't know what science is. So they categorize science into the same kind of thing as opinion, as a church elder might have. So a church elder says one thing, evidence says another thing. It's all the same thing as far as I'm concerned. For people who don't understand how science actually leads to the creation of evidence, which leads to what? Something we call the truth.
Like you worked hard in your education, I assume, as I did. Like I did post-secondary, period of 8 years, and then I'd had a period of time after that where I had to do provisional work as a provisional psychologist. So like it's years and years and years of dedication, study, and being scrutinized as to be able to do it properly, right?
Right.
And to go through all of that, like say 10 to 15 years of post-secondary work, and to really try and understand things as they are from what the evidence says from the scientific method, right? Now, for if someone was to come in and see me and I'm able to offer an assessment based on all those years of experience, and then that just to be invalidated out of hand as
Right.
like something that's just my opinion, that's really not, it's really hard to swallow that. And I
I
think
know.
that's what, likewise in your field, what you go through when
Right.
people they out of hand dismiss your statements. I think,
Fewer than 1 in 200 people who get a PhD in the natural sciences go on to be a full professor.
Mhm.
Think about that. There's a lot of people out there getting a PhD, and it's hard work. You get a master's degree, you get a PhD. This takes a long time, and you're subjected to all kinds of exams and blah, blah, blah. And you learn how to think critically. And then fewer than 1 in 200 of those people go on to become a full professor.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's that indicates something is going on with these people who make it a full professor, that they either have the mm, work ethic to get to that point, or they're intelligent, or both.
So it's a big mountain to climb, whether you're in ecology or psychology, or related things or similarly difficult things. It's a long mountain to climb. and and you gain a whole ton of practical experience along the way so that you can make sense of the things that are like more true and the things that are more false, right? Uh, like I think I can pick out particular types of mental health conditions probably more efficiently than someone who hasn't been in the field for 10 or 15 years or
Right,
more, right?
right.
And that's taken a
Or
lot of ability and effort to do that.
or somebody who watches TV and drinks beer all the time.
Right.
And that has somehow enabled them into making psychological judgments that are relevant.
And then we get to this point, like in the process where so much information has been collected through the literature that you've done, like in your essay at Nature Bats Last, which is a wonderful piece of work with so much so many references in there. And then you get to this point where people are saying that you're just wrong, like where Michael Mann would just say you're just wrong in your conclusions after all of this effort, like a tremendous amount of effort. It's not like you just have been doing this for a month.
Right.
I just want to keep coming back to this. Like we work on these things for so long, and then for them to be discredited in an instant
And
is.
and we depend upon the work of others in reaching our conclusions. That's important,
Mhm.
right? So some of the work that I cite is done by Michael Mann. And so for him to claim that I'm wrong is to claim that he's wrong.
Right, right. And
And
the thing that they really don't like is that I think you go one step further. Like there's the conservative approach, and then you go one step further to say
right,
this is the conclusion. People
right.
they don't like the conclusion,
Oh
I
no.
find.
Oh no, not at all. Especially if you have a teenage daughter, like Michael Mann does, for example. Then you don't like the outcome that people are going to die. Well, obviously, every species before us has gone extinct, including 8 species of in the genus Homo, in our genus, in what we would recognize as humans. Those 8 species have gone extinct, mostly as a result of abrupt climate change. But it can't happen to us. It just can't
Right, right.
because we're so smart.
Hmm. And maybe it would have happened even without all of the excessive fossil fuel use. It sounds like that's what you're saying, if it happened 8 times before.
Of course, it was almost certain to happen ultimately because more than 99% of the species that have come into existence have gone extinct,
Right.
right? And at some point towards the end of the life of the last individuals of every species that were sentient, I'm sure some organisms, some people, whatever, were saying, well, that can't happen to us.
Right. Right. Yeah, the denial aspect of it all.
We're
Which
just
is,
too
yeah,
special. We're just too special for that.
which is that false sense of security,
Hmm.
which I think popular culture and dare I say religion try to uh, get people indoctrinated into is that a false sense of a lot of things, actually, but
Right,
especially a false sense of security
right.
by
And
coming up with particular narratives.
so that brings up one of my questions that we went back and forth about a little bit. Are there reasonable ways to question religion, including the religion of this culture? And I'm going to define religious here from the Merriam-Webster online dictionary. Religious means relating to or manifesting faithful devotion to an acknowledged ultimate reality or deity. So I see people doing that with respect to this set of living arrangements all the time. They're
Mhm.
completely devoted to it.
Yep. The deity is money, right?
Yes, absolutely. And
Uh,
an acknowledged ultimate reality or deity. So the reality is that we have this set of living arrangements that is driven to a great extent by the pursuit of money. And how could that end up any other way?
and I have identified or understood that at a level I think where I'm happy to acknowledge that reciprocally, or just to say I get it. I think I don't know how others cannot get it. Like so, you have a culture that worships money, even though they would say that they don't in many cases, but they do because 90 like how what percentage of their daily activities is devoted to trying to get more money? I mean, that's all you have to look at. What percentage of your daily life is devoted to trying to get more money? If it's like 90% or more, then I think you worship money,
Yeah,
right?
I, I'd say if it's 30% or more
That's
myself.
30% of
I
our,
mean, our lives are short, right? And if you're going to spend your short life of what, 50, 60, 70, 80 years, 80 years is getting pretty darn old. 70 is getting pretty old. You're going to
Mhm.
spend all that time worshiping and pursuing money,
Right,
and you're going to call that normal? I,
right.
I don't think so.
Because like what the thing that happens when you are primarily focused on billing your bank account, I don't know, you get a really narrow view, is my experience. So you are focused on achieving that end, and then all of the things that you do that have potential consequences to everyone else in the environment sort of get ignored. So like all of the waste you might produce from trying to achieve a certain thing, or gosh, all of the things that could collectively contribute to harm in various ways. I mean, do
Mhm.
people really think about the things they do to the environment when they're like pursuing a goal? Like when I was focused on getting my master's degree or whatever, I that's all I was focused on. Like and I wasn't thinking about these environmental issues at the time, right? I was just like your carbon copy person out there. But I wasn't thinking like, oh, how many trips in my car am I doing, like to like achieve this goal?
Well,
Um,
and you're not the only one. We all live in these silos. Universities are organized around these silos, and nobody gets outside their silos. So the psychologist doesn't go visit the ecologist. Are you kidding me? They don't even
right,
know each other. They never even
right,
heard of each other. They didn't
right,
know there was such a field as ecology.
right. Yeah. Um, and it's almost like all the harmful things, like if you they it's because of the American dream would say what you need is to have ambition, right? And then if you can prove through your ambition, your relentless ambition, that you can achieve that goal, then then you're worthy to be one of the highest among us, kind of thing. Um, but like when someone, I hate to pick on Elon, but like he has all these factories, right, for different, for all his Tesla cars and everything, and he has this ambition to probably help the world, maybe. I don't know if that's his true ambition, but he's got big ambitions. He's one of the richest men on the planet. But what about all the consequences that come from all that action and activity? Or what are the consequences? Do they get tabulated? The consequences of your ambitions, do they get tabulated ever?
And if so, by whom? I don't know. I don't know anybody who's keeping track.
Like how much fossil fuel do you have to consume to start a Tesla factory and to create whatever 100,000 cars? Like what damage does that have to do? Or Apple, like they have to get so much from the cobalt mines. How much do they have to extract? And
Right.
how many people have to be slaves to that to get that cobalt
Right.
to create an iPhone, right?
Right.
Like,
So there's something called an environmental footprint that has been developed to apply to individuals. So you can go on there and say, I drive this much and I drink this much and I eat this much and I spend this much time at my workplace and blah, blah, blah. And it'll tell you how many Earths it takes to support
right,
people living just like
right.
you, right?
So I think a lot of the quietness and secrecy and the culture of just being like, don't talk. It's like we're not tabulating the consequences of the way that we live. Because I think you could do this with both mental health and environment. Like, if people actually knew that if they actually had a tabulation of the consequences of the way that they live, would they still buy the product? Would they still live that lifestyle if
Right.
they consciously knew all of the consequences that come with it? And to
Right.
me, that's what they want the blackout to be, right? Like, like
Right. So this takes us back to the Iroquois Confederacy, which was or confederation, a group of indigenous tribes that did not take any significant action until they considered what happened 7 generations from now by taking the action.
right.
I don't know about you, but I don't know a lot of people who do that. Right? So should we
We
go
do
out
the
to dinner?
opposite. We do the
Right.
opposite of
Should we
that.
go out to dinner tonight? Well, I don't know. What are going to be the impacts 7 generations from now of four of us going out to eat dinner?
Right. And that's one of the traditions. Like, gosh, if we really wanted sustainability, then we would do that, right? And we would consciously ponder what are the impacts of my decisions.
Or
It's
we would build a Tesla. It's one or the
Tesla,
other.
right? Because Teslas are going to save the world, I guess, right? As long as we have electric cars, then all of the impacts that we've had along the way will be erased.
Yeah, where does that electricity come from? Oh, that's right, by burning coal.
Yeah,
Where does that
yeah,
coal come from? Oh, that's right. We dig it up using oil.
right, right,
But let's not
right,
think about these things.
right. And let's just say that the people who talk about these things are crazy, wackadoodle, tinfoil hat people, right? So,
There you go.
even though they have 20 plus years in post-secondary education and tenure and
Yeah.
multiple publications and books and
When you say wackadoodle, you're speaking my language.
Yeah, I mean, I'm afraid that, I mean, and I know people probably judge me that way because of the way I look at the world and even that I have conversations with you. But I like to think of it as I like to be forthright about myself and the world and how things happen. I'd rather live with integrity than live a lie. That's why I talk to Guy McPherson. So,
So that brings
um,
up another question. Question number four on my list. How do we raise the issue of abrupt, irreversible climate change with people of various ages? And you have people of various ages in your life on a daily basis, and I don't because of decisions I made long ago. So I interact primarily with people approximately my age, people who are in their late 30s or later, right? And
yeah,
that's a completely different kettle of fish because these people, for the most part, would acknowledge that they have lived their lives, at
yeah.
least the majority of their lives, and they've had an opportunity to pursue the things they wanted to pursue. And sometimes it didn't work out, and sometimes it did. I used to, when I was on speaking tour, I would interact with a lot of young people, and I interacted with a lot of young people on campus, obviously, people from the age of 18 and up. And when I was on speaking tour, sometimes it included high school kids. And it was really interesting because people who had not yet committed their lives to making money to make their lives comfortable, people up to, say, their mid 20s, seem to accept the idea of abrupt, irreversible climate change much more readily and with greater comfort than people who were older. People in their 40s who are sort of committed at that point to their career, to their seeking their ambitions. It seemed to me like most people, say 40 and older, just they just can't go there. They just can't accept the idea that they're going to die.
Okay, so yeah, the question is basically if a person is older, they're more sort of set in their ways than a person who's younger and maybe pondering options and maybe has a bit more openness. I think people absolutely kind of get set in their ways. I guess even like neurologically, when you've been thinking in a certain way for an extended period of time, you can kind of those neural pathways can get kind of they can be really ingrained or a deep groove, and they can be hard to depart from.
Mhm.
So yeah, if you grew up with a certain understanding or a certain set of beliefs, it can be, I think, as time passes, it's harder to break those beliefs or create, new ways of looking at things. Uh, and psychologically, I think a person's sense of security has a lot to do with however they believe. So if you believe the world works a certain way, or if you believe in a certain kind of spirituality, a lot of your sense of security and being able to get through life day to day kind of depends on that. And to abandon those beliefs is pretty hardcore, pretty,
Oh,
pretty,
yeah.
pretty, pretty dangerous.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I come across a lot of people, myself included, who have a certain set of beliefs for a long time to to toss those aside and believe something different, to actually think about what is going on in the world.
Hmm.
That's
Hmm.
tough.
No, it's yeah, and I've seen that many times in psychology practice, and that's one of the hurdles a person needs to get over is to let go of some of the beliefs that have been serving them in certain ways, but actually are harmful in the long run.
Hmm.
And that's the weird thing about human beliefs and the way that we live our lives. And it probably speaks actually to the whole thing when you talk about environment. Like we're in this sort of this short-term security mentality, right? And we've almost become, I think we've become addicted to it, or many of us have.
Right.
And it's like to try and shift someone's thinking is like trying to break an addiction to a short-term benefit model, really. And I think that's probably one of the biggest hurdle or the biggest challenges you've probably faced with your message and being able to impart it to the world is people don't want to shift away from that short-term benefit mentality
Right.
into like what actually works, what is actually sustainable. Um, and kind of going like, we haven't been doing that, right?
Right.
People,
And the entire society hasn't been doing that. Our entire society is based on the idea that we can have infinite growth on a finite planet. That
Mhm.
doesn't make any sense, of course, but if you're indoctrinated, just like indoctrinated into any other set of beliefs, if you're indoctrinated into the idea that we can continue to grow more with less, then how are you going to get out of that? I don't think you can.
And I think we should say part of that indoctrination, I mean, you have sort of the capitalist indoctrination that's coupled with the often the Christian indoctrination. And the indoctrination says when everything goes horrible, you're going to be saved from the magical person from the sky, right? So like you can pretend to play this infinite growth game because you're going to get saved eventually.
Right.
Um, and I'm pretty sure those two get coupled together, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. I, did civilizations arise at the same time that the Abrahamic religions did? I think so.
Pretty
I think
well, similar
it,
timeline, yes.
it's very similar timeline. So there might be some connection, maybe even a strong connection there between the notion that we can have infinite growth on a finite planet and this notion that God will provide, right?
Or add save as needed, right?
Right,
If you followed the doctrines properly, kind of thing,
right.
right? Like,
Yes.
which is basically means a whole lot of conformity. That's what that
So
means.
So I want to come back to my question again. Are there reasonable ways to question religion, including the religion of this culture, of course, but how can we, I mean, if you go up a church when church lets out and you go up and start talking to those people, what are you thinking,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
What's going on in there that makes you think that your behavior is rational? You're gonna get slapped, right? That's not a way to a reasonable conversation. So, are there reasonable ways to question religion or not? I don't know.
I uh I know many people have tried, even if you have one religion trying to counter another, they'll
Hmm.
kind of stand outside each other's doorway and then hand out pamphlets to the opposing one. Like, and then they just end up having Bible thumping battles, right? Basically, or whatever. And it goes nowhere, ultimately, I think. So, I mean, people have definitely tried to approach this logically, um, somehow trying to make arguments for their belief system against another. It's one of the hardest things to do, I think, and I think probably the experiences of people out there would prove it. Even if you just look up videos on YouTube about how people have tried to approach people on the street and counter different belief systems, it's very, very hard. And so, um, but I mean, abrupt irreversible climate change is not a belief system. It's a fact-driven theory, isn't it? That's different than a belief system.
Right, right, absolutely. These are facts. These are facts. We're in the midst of the most abrupt event in planetary history.
So it's not
So,
like you're saying like whose deity is the best. I mean, unless people say science is like a deity, which I know they've said that,
oh yeah, of course they have.
right?
So here's a line from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's global warming of 1.5 degrees. This came out on October 8th, 2018. And the line is even abrupt geophysical events do not approach current rates of human-driven change. Think about that for a minute. What that means is the interstellar body that struck the Yucatan Peninsula about 66 million years ago and drove the dinosaurs to extinction, along with a lot of other species. It was a mass extinction event. That event doesn't approach current rates of human-driven change. We're driving environmental change faster than a meteor striking the planet.
Or a volcano, a massive volcano,
That's
or multi.
amazing. And so
Yes.
you can't tell me we're not number one.
And are people actually hearing that when you say that? Because sometimes I think it kind of just goes over our heads sometimes when you say these things. But like, so
Of,
all of the fossil fuel emissions collectively from the whole planet, people everywhere driving cars and using coal, and all the heat and everything, all that collectively is more than a meteor striking the Earth, like if with the rapid pulse emissions over every day, right? Like,
Yes. Yes, exactly. And that's a little difficult to absorb because in my daily life, it feels like I'm not doing anything, right? Even though
yeah,
right now, I have a space heater on, a laptop, a separate microphone, and two very expensive high lights, right? Bright lights lighting me up.
right, right, right.
But it seems like I'm not using that much in terms of fossil fuels, so it can't be my fault. Multiply by more than 8 billion people, and you can see where we have a problem.
And that's where it's hard to see it for what it is. I guess it's because it's small amounts times billions. And you do
Right.
that day after day after day after day after day.
Right.
Um,
And then the
and then,
occasional billionaire who has to take two jets every time he goes downtown to buy a Pepsi, right?
right, right, yeah. So I mean, there's the larger emitters, but I mean, it's probably like the billions of people doing small amounts of emissions. It just adds up, right?
Absolutely.
In the
And
grand scheme of things.
we were all brought up this way, right?
Right.
I mean, none of us knew that there was anything other than a personal automobile. Of course, I have to have my own personal automobile. Of course, have to live in a house by myself or with my family. Of course, my family has to have a certain number of cars and a certain number of garages and a certain number of everything. We have to
Yeah.
heat the house or the kids are going to die of hypothermia. We have to cool the house or they're going to die from heat exhaustion, right? So we have to do all these things if we're going to survive in society. And collectively, those all those things adds up to too many fossil fuels.
Like one of the ways I've been able to see the consequences of this way of living is going to the dump. I don't know if you've ever dropped off your own garbage at the dump.
Oh yes. I have a
And
story to
then,
tell. When I was a kid, we used to go to the dump for pleasure, for leisure, because there would be birds there that you couldn't see just everywhere. And oh, it was disgusting now that I think about it. But then I thought it was great fun.
yeah, at that, yeah, like I mean, every week I'm like, so we're throwing about 5 or 6 bags of garbage a week, right? And then when you go to the dump, and then you see just the mounds and mounds of sludge, and uh, and this, and then we just kind of drive away, going, it's all going to be buried under the dirt. It's no big deal.
Right. This is fine.
But that's just like one small part of the waste, right? Like, because there's I guess, the physical waste from all the products that we consume and all our daily life. But then there's all the invisible waste, and that's probably way more than what we can see. Um, the all the greenhouse, all the emissions and all the
Right.
greenhouse gases and all that, and all the
Right.
particulates and everything.
Absolutely.
Um,
You know, we only go once a week or once every 2 weeks to the waste transfer station, and they actually do something pretty intelligent here. They charge for the garbage. Recycling is free,
oh
and
yeah,
that ensures that everybody is separating out the recycling from their garbage and
oh
trying to
yeah,
minimize the amount of garbage because it costs, it costs $6 or whatever it is for each contractor bag of garbage.
oh yeah. Okay,
So
interesting.
that
So
actually
it's
makes sense.
so there's a bit of an awareness built into that because of the cost.
Right,
I once had a coworker who said that we shouldn't do recycling. Like we should just put everything in the street to see what we actually do, right? Because when you're playing the recycling game, it's another one of those hiding things. We're
right,
like we're hiding it away and we're doing this virtue signaling thing, like we're so virtuous because we're recycling. But it's just it's a game of like it's hide and put yourself on a pedestal kind of a game, right? But if we actually put everything in the street for what we consume, we'd see what we actually do.
right. And so would our neighbors, right? And they wouldn't be impressed. Oh, look at that. Their place is a garbage dump.
Well, our life is a garbage dump, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
But we pretend that it isn't. But if we would actually admit that it is a garbage dump, maybe we'd be like, this isn't a very good way to live, is it? right?
I, I went to a presentation many, many years ago. It was probably when I was in graduate school, and this individual was saying that currently we dump all the garbage and then we cover it up, and that makes it perfect for leaching heavy metals down into the groundwater. So he says, what we need to do is start building these mountains or taking advantage of existing mountains and putting the garbage on top where everybody can see it. If
Hmm.
everybody can see it, fewer people are going to throw out the garbage. So
Yeah.
just like your example of putting it in the street, if we collectively put it on the mountainside that everybody can see from their house or when they're driving to work or whatever, then there will be some awareness at least.
It's like that movie Wall-E. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's a cartoon. But anyway, I think the garbage builds up so much that they can't just use garbage dumps anymore. And then they have to leave the planet because there's just garbage everywhere. Right?
Right.
So,
Yes, I saw Wally.
yeah,
Wally
yeah,
with an E on the end.
yeah, 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 yeah. And then you have, yeah, the fat and plump citizens on the ship waiting to come back to Earth. It's a good one, I think. A good portrayal, of the reality of like,
Right.
what we actually are,
Absolutely.
largely. Yeah.
But nobody wants to see that though.
So, I mean, like talking about these subjects, right? I mean, there's the us and the few thousand maybe that are curious to and willing to be honest about these things. Um, but by and large, I think people much prefer to have their head, where,
Yes. We'll call it
because
in the sand.
sure, in the sand. Because it means that then you wouldn't have to feel I guess, the guilt and shame that would come from acknowledging what is really and truly happening and been happening for years now, and the long-term consequences of it, right? It's much easier to just pretend that it's not real, and that there's no real long-term consequence. So,
Right. Right.
which really is the mentality of an addict. It really is.
Yes, absolutely. And we're all addicts.
If you're an addict, then you live a certain way and pretend that there's no long-term consequences.
Yeah, we're
When
just
there,
waiting for somebody else to solve it. That's what we've been doing since I was a kid.
or there isn't even a solution needed, right?
Right. Right. That's even better if we think that.
So, I mean, yeah, I thoroughly enjoy being frank like this, and I kind of miss the comments, just the good ones. The old days when you had comments on the videos,
Right.
because we could see, which ones align with the thinking and which ones would rather see us hung by
Right.
rope.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. Yeah, there's too many of those people who wanted me hung by a rope. I just couldn't tolerate it
Yeah,
anymore.
totally understandable. Yep,
Ah, oh well. Anyway, let's wrap this up right now
yep,
and with a final mention of your free course, and I look forward to next week's conversation.
for sure. And so I'm really thankful that Guy has allowed me to talk about my mental health course. It's been a long-term endeavor of at least 10 years, where I've been studying the topic of borderline personality disorder for my own benefit and wanting to help others, like many others out there. Actually, there's various YouTube channels and various podcasts that cover this topic because it's a common health issue. And I think it is directly connected to living in this set of living circumstances that Guy refers to that has affected the environment. I think it affects us individually as people, especially when we have certain genetic types of predispositions and we live in certain types of environments that don't support those predispositions. In other words, we don't learn how to live in our bodies so that we can have good experiences with people and avoid other hurtful disorders like depression and anxiety and body dysmorphia and traumas and all kinds of things. So if you want to get more knowledgeable and you want to get stronger, be able to live in this body and help others do the same so that life can be at least somewhat enjoyable, and as long as we have it, then check out freebpdcourse.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Look forward
Yeah,
to chatting again next week. And until
sounds
then,
good.
everybody have a great week.